Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dr. Carmen Puliafito, and I'm happy to be joined here today with my good friend and colleague, Dr. Jay Duker. Welcome to Retina Synthesis, Jay.
Thanks, Carmen. Thanks for inviting me.
Jay is the chairman of the Department of Ophthalmology at the Tufts University School of Medicine and is also director of the New England Eye Center. Recently, he assumed an additional role, which is Chief Strategic Clinical Officer at EyePoint Pharmaceuticals. So Jay, why don't you tell us a little bit about EyePoint, its market position, its technology, its products, and its future?
So EyePoint is actually a company whose name not a lot of ophthalmologists necessarily know, but whose products you probably do. EyePoint has been around for a long time. It was originally called Controlled Delivery Systems, and its original product was the Ganciclovir implant. Which was a tremendous breakthrough in the treatment of CMV retinitis that, during the early AIDS epidemic, we were seeing literally thousands of new cases a year. A controlled delivery system went through several iterations. And most recently, several years ago, the board of directors at the company, which was then called Cyvita, decided that they wanted to be more of a commercial company rather than a research and development company. And they reached out to me actually at that time and asked me to join the board of directors to give us some insight as to what ophthalmologists really were looking for and how the products they were developing would be acceptable to the ophthalmic community. At the same time, Cyvita underwent a leadership change and brought Nancy Lurker in as the CEO. And Nancy has worked really hard to elevate the company as a commercial stage company. The name change came around about 3 years ago. And just after that, about 2 years ago, EyePoint actually had 2 successful launches of new FDA-approved products. One of them was a product that we in-licensed called DEXYCU, which is used to control inflammation after ocular surgery. It's an intracameral steroid that's placed in the anterior chamber of the eye immediately after surgery and allows the patient to forgo topical steroid eye drops. The second product was a product that the company developed in-house that's called YUTIQ. YUTIQ is a long-acting corticosteroid implant that is placed in the office as an intravitreal injection, and the indication is chronic non-infectious uveitis. YUTIQ is very effective. It's a microdose of steroid that lasts on average about 3 years. And the studies suggest that in patients with chronic uveitis, about 60% of eyes will be recurrence-free using YUTIQ over that 3-year period. Surprisingly, the side effects are fairly low. There's a fairly low incidence of elevated intraocular pressure, despite this being a corticosteroid. So those are the 2 commercial products that the company has. As we're all well aware, the COVID epidemic has touched all aspects of life. And because the primary users of DEXYCU are cataract surgeons, and because cataract surgery essentially ground to a halt in this country due to COVID, the sales of DEXYCU during this past year have not been terrific. But things are rebounding as cataract surgery picks up again. And the company has signed some nice commercial agreements with various owners and operators of various surgery centers around the country, as well as with a company called Imprimis to help distribute DEXYCU. YUTIQ continues to do very well in the market, and uveitis specialists and retina specialists are using it now quite frequently to treat uveitis. So my role in the company over the past year and a half has been a bit more of what a board member would normally do. Nancy Lurker turned to me to give her some advice over strategy and pipeline and things like that. And finally, several months ago, she came to me and said, Jay, why don't we just make this formal? Why don't we give you an official part-time position in the company? I said, sure, but I don't, of course, don't want it to interfere with my primary job as a retina specialist and a researcher and, running the department here. And we've made it such that I'm able to, I believe, successfully balance those two roles. So my job at EyePoint is a bit unique. I don't have anybody necessarily, reporting to me. I'm involved in the development of our major pipeline product, which is called EYP-1901, which I'm happy to talk about shortly. But I'm also really assisting the company in looking at their pipeline. What EyePoint does that's really unique is they've got a really terrific FDA-approved delivery system for the eye. The delivery system is approved in 4 products. It's been shown to be safe in tens of thousands of patients. And that delivery system is excellent for small molecules. And we're able to leverage that technology to deliver other small molecules and other companies' small molecules. And that's the other exciting part about this job is looking at the pipeline and trying to focus the company on what's likely to be successful in the near future.
So you have a vision of the future of the treatment of macular neovascularization that is related to your work at the company.
Well, I think we all would agree who treats this disease that the drugs we have to treat it are really terrific, but they don't last very long. We really like to have a drug with anti-VEGF activity with the same safety profile of the drugs that we have now that are able to consistently last more than 1 or 2 months. I mean, consistently. Sure, we've got patients who we can treat PRN and they, could go longer than that, or we treat and extend out to 3 months. But wouldn't it be great to have a consistent injection that in everybody lasted 3 to 4 or up to 6 months? So that is the vision that I've had and what got me excited about really assisting EyePoint in bringing this product forward. The product is called EYP-1901. It's a tyrosine kinase inhibitor. The active product in it is called vorolanib. And vorolanib is actually known to the retina community because it was originally developed by a company called Tyrogenex. And Tyrogenex had originally developed it as an oral agent. The story behind vorolanib is it was developed by the same scientist who developed sunitinib, which is FDA approved for kidney cancer. The idea was vorolanib would be as effective as sunitinib, but would have less toxicity. And that's why Tyrogenex said, well, if it's got less toxicity, maybe we can deliver it orally for wet AMD. And they did a phase 1 trial, which was actually fairly impressive. In their phase 1 trial, 60% of the patients who completed the trial needed no injections over 6 months, taking various doses of vorolanib. But unfortunately, the hope about the safety of vorolanib didn't pan out in the phase 2 trial, and the phase 2 trial was never completed because of significant liver toxicity in the drug. But the idea is taking this TKI and putting it into the Durasert sustained release technology that's already FDA approved and having it release with 0 order kinetics over a period of approximately 6 months. So TKIs, or tyrosine kinase inhibitors, are really not well understood by ophthalmologists. We understand antibodies in the eye, but not TKIs. Can you explain a little bit about where TKIs are involved in inhibition of neovascularization? So I think the first thing to take a step back and say, well, why would you use a TKI, not an antibody or an antibody fragment? And I think the answer is quite simply, having an antibody, a protein, last for months at body temperature inside the eye is not an easy thing to do. There's been a lot of companies that have tried to do it. And as of now, we still don't have any true FDA-approved sustained release devices for an antibody or antibody fragment. Small molecules actually are able to be worked with a little bit better in these delivery systems. And the VEGF receptor is a TK receptor, tyrosine kinase receptor. And so it makes sense to think about using a TKI for the VEGF receptor. The problem with the TKIs is they're not very specific. There are a lot of receptors in our bodies that are tyrosine kinase receptors. And therefore, you're trying to get a TKI that really is as selective as possible to the VEGF receptors without causing undue side effects. Now, the nice part about delivering it as the eye is you don't really have to worry about those systemic toxicities. Just the same idea behind delivering, Avastin locally to the eye as you and Phil Rosenfeld did many years ago in Miami. The idea is we're going to circumvent the systemic effects in doing that. And this isn't a new concept. There are companies that have worked on tyrosine kinase inhibitors delivered topically to the eye to try to penetrate into the posterior segment. And the problem they ran into is not that you couldn't get enough of the drug to the back of the eye to have a positive effect, but that when you did, you often ran into corneal toxicity. So by putting the TKI to block the VEGF receptor directly into the eye, hopefully we're going to have a better safety profile than what's been shown in these previous studies.
So in your model, how often would this drug be delivered?
Well, we hope about once every 6 months. So the implant, this is an erodible form of the Duracert implant. The Duracert implant that's used, for example, in our Utique or Alimera's drug, Illuvian, it's the same technology. Those are encased in a polyamide tube, and those polyamide tubes slow down the release rate. That's why the drug can last up to 3 years. By the same token, the polyamide tubes don't go away. So we, as an anti-VEGF drug, we don't want one that lasts 3 years. The sweet spot, I think, is right around 6 months. And plus, if we're going to do multiple injections, we don't want a lot of these non-erodible tubes to be hanging around inside the eye. Hence the erodible Duracert technology. So we're going to really have to see in a human eye how long the implant lasts and how long it works. But presumably what we'll be doing once we hopefully show some efficacy in the phase 1 trials, as we plan the phase 2 and phase 3 trials, we're going to be doing re-injections to try to prevent reactivation of the disease. I think similar to what Genentech did with their refillable port technology. They decided in the phase 3 trial to refill everybody at 6 months, even though they had patients in the early trial, some went along as long as 1.5 years without reactivation.
Right.
So the important thing, I think, in this situation is to have a tight window to say, the vast majority of patients can go 4 months, 5 months, 6 months without reactivation of their wet AMD. And that's really what's important, is the reliability of the implant. I don't think any of us will make a big deal if we have to re-inject it every 4 months or versus 6 months versus 8 months, as long as for those period of time, it's a reliable therapy.
Can you engineer the delivery system to establish a given rate?
Yes. So there are multiple variables we can do. There's some that are obvious. The length of the implant, for example. The bore of the needle. We can put it through a 22 gauge. We can put it through a 25 gauge. We could probably put it through a 27 gauge. And so the dose of the drug, the actual amount of drug that's delivered, can be variable depending on those parameters. The other thing we actually have developed now is the technology to inject multiple implants through a single needle. So if you want to get a higher dose, you can put 2 or even up to 3 implants into an eye with a single injection. There are other things we can do in the manufacturing that can alter the release rate as well. So what we're trying to do is kind of get into that sweet spot of a high enough dose that it reliably takes care of the vast majority of patients' wet AMD without reactivation, but not last too short, not last too long, not be too big, not be too multiple. But there are multiple parameters that the scientists at EyePoint can adjust to account for that.
So in your model, you would achieve structural dryness in the retina, and then
maybe,
and then move on to your product.
So yes, and so I think that's one approach, and I think it would be perfectly acceptable to most retina specialists, and perfectly acceptable to have a label that might say, well, new onset wet AMD previously untreated, do 3 monthly injections of an antibody, and then use our product as maintenance. It may also be possible that our product will have enough drug release to be a primary treatment as well. We don't know that yet. But either way, that I think if we're able to maintain the majority of patients under a maintenance type therapy without reinjection over a period of, as I said, 4, 5, 6 months, that's going to be a very successful product, whether patients have to be induced with an antibody or not.
What are your phase 1 trial design?
Open label, no control, dose escalation. Interestingly, when we spoke to the FDA originally about the phase 1 trial design, they were so comfortable with vorolanib as a molecule because they've seen it go through phase 1 and phase 2, and they've seen the IND from Tyrogenex, and they were so comfortable with Durasert as a delivery system. They said, well, you can do as few as 6 patients and then go right on to a phase 2. We're not going to do that. We're going to do dose escalation, and then presumably at the high dose that we believe is going to work, we'll do additional patients to show efficacy and get some idea down the road of how long these implants are actually lasting, which will help us design the phase 2 and the phase 3 trial. So like most phase 1s, the primary endpoint is safety, but I think all of us who are involved in this, we want to show some sign of efficacy as well.
So are you going to look at eyes with active macular neovascularization in this trial?
And we're going to do eyes that are previously treated that have shown a response to an anti-VEGF. So when you say active, they may not be active per se in the sense of having fluid or hemorrhage at the time they're enrolled, but they have to have been active at some point prior.
Right. Well, this is exciting, Jay. Really, truly is.
But it's really been fun to be on this side of it as well. A lot of us get involved in clinical research, and in retina especially, we've had terrific opportunities to partner with industry. But to actually see what goes on and lift up the hood and look under and say, what does it take to get an IND and to get it into the clinic and all the work behind that, it's really fascinating to be part of that. And the part that I think I've added to the company is to give them the clinical perspective of, what do clinicians want? What are we looking for? What are the things that are important to us and to our patients and to the families? And how can we try to develop a product that's not only going to work in the laboratory, but check the boxes of all those constituents that we take care of?
So what advice would you give to your colleagues that might be interested in a career in industry?
Well, I think the primary thing to do, and my general advice is, do the things that you really find fun and are passionate about. It's one thing to say, oh yeah, I'd like a job in industry, but if you don't like problem solving and you don't like teamwork, it's not going to go very far. I mean, that's really what these industry approaches are. You've got problems, you're going to have a series of problems. Every day might be a different one, and you've got to be able to keep an open mind and think outside the box, but work within a team. And because these are very, very complicated issues, and the studies are very complicated. And I got to say, Carmen, you and I, we go way back. I don't believe, when we started together, 30 some years ago, that you would have said, oh yeah, Jay, he's headed for a career in industry. I love taking care of patients, and I still do. But this is kind of how my career evolved, is that I had a certain skill set, and I really brought me joy and brought me satisfaction to be able to help companies solve these problems.
And you have to have an institution that's willing to see the value of your participation in industry.
Absolutely. And I do have to say, Tufts is we have the same type of program that everybody has about, the separation of church and state, and you have to declare all the things that you do and be very open about it. But I have no problem with that. I really don't. I think the only way we're going to advance our field, or the field of medicine, is to link with industry, because this stuff is very expensive, as you well know, and that just grants from the government and other ways of developing funding is just never going to be enough to really see these type of products through to the end.
Well, Jay, this has been a great conversation. I'm waiting for great things from EyePoint and great things from Jay Duker. Thanks a lot.
Carmen. Nice to talk to you.
Of your fans at Retina Synthesis.